Hello and welcome to Classical Stuff You Should Know, a podcast about three guys talking about whatever we want to. My name is Thomas Magby. I am joined as always by Mr. AJ Hannenberg.
That's me.
And Mr. Graham Donaldson.
Hello.
And today Graham will be leading an episode on two things that we as a podcast lack: sense and sensibility.
I think we have.
They're pretty good.
I like
Thank you.
that one.
Good.
That was
I think
good.
we have a lot of sensibility. I don't know
Okay,
about
good.
sense.
Well, I guess we'll find out.
We're senseless but sensible.
Okay,
Is that-
interesting.
This, it's more. So I think we use the word sense. Maybe we lack sense. So anyway, we'll get there. This is the reason we're doing this. So I've done an Emma episode.
Yes.
I don't know if we've done a Pride and Prejudice episode. Maybe
thought
we
you
did
did.
a
I think
long
we
time
have.
ago,
I
but
think
a
you
not-
long
have.
time ago.
But this is kind of like, we're going to do another one because I'm kind of doing this as a series. I'm going to do an episode like this on every single Austen book, and there's 5 of them, I think.
We totally have done a Pride and Prejudice. It's
So
back in
there's
2021.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility, Emma, Mansfield Park, and Northanger Abbey. There's 5. Oh, Persuasion, 6.
Can I
There's
just
6 of
share?
them.
So when AJ posts the episodes, he'll list the people in the episode, so like the 3 of us, but he always changes the names. Do you remember that you do this? And so for this one,
Yeah, I still do it.
Do you? I clearly I don't follow this. It's you only see it if you go to the website, right? Like you don't see it in the podcast feed.
and then click on the little thing. Like it's just that one little spot.
It's very funny. So anyway, this one, the 3 participants are Collins, Wickham, and Darcy, and then it says AJ is Darcy. That's very good. Thank you, AJ.
Very funny.
That's very good.
We're probably going to be redoing another one because I'm sort of doing it with an eye for having this be a series. But what I'm going to do every single, so it's 6, all 6 Jane Austen novels. Just sort of like very similar to the Emma episode where we're sort of going through the entirety of the novel and maybe drawing out a couple of themes so that people could use it if they're using it in schools or they can just sort of for their own enjoyment as primers to the book. But then I've got in the background, I'm also doing a lot of reading on Jane Austen's life herself. And I kind of have this like longer series in mind that I want to put together that's using Jane Austen as a takeoff point for talking about some other things. But that's coming down the line. So anyway, just as a classical stuff kind of like roadmap, that's why we're getting all these Austen books, is because I'm reading them all. And these are going to be used, these are just sort of like, so you can know the book, and then down the line I want to be doing something where we're using all of these books, but I've kind of got like a bigger axe to grind, a bigger thesis that I'm working out. So anyway, that's why we're doing all these books.
Are you teaching these books? Like, where did this
No, I'm not
start
teaching
from?
any of this stuff. It started because I taught Pride and Prejudice for years, and then I pivoted to Emma. So just full disclosure, as of right now, I've read every Jane Austen book except Northanger Abbey and Mansfield Park. Haven't read those ones. I've read every other one. And I love them. I think they're wonderful. But I also think the like Jane Austen industrial complex that exists in this world actually isn't helping a reading or understanding of her books. When Hannenberg and I were in Bath, you could go to the Jane Austen Museum. And I was like, oh, that sounds kind of cool. And I looked into it. And it's not cool. It was like, it was very much geared and tailored towards almost like more like fans of the movies than like the book. Maybe they talked about like her life and sort of stuff, but it felt more like a Jane Austen entertainment experience than it did like
The history of.
her like the real historical person, if that makes any sense.
So you all did not end up.
So we didn't end up going. I think it was actually closed the day we were there. We did not end up going. But anyway, so today we're talking about Sense and Sensibility. So spoilers for this, 200-year-old book if you've never read it before. But let's get into it. All right. So and ultimately, I think the book is about, maybe not ultimately, but one of the main themes, at least the thing that I've been thinking about as I read through it, is like what happens when men fail, like when males in society and are big failures. Not in terms of like they tried something and they failed at it, but like they are moral failures. Because almost every male in this book is like a failure, is a big moral failure. And the effect that has on everybody around them, especially their wives or the women who are in love with them and that kind of stuff. So that's maybe this is like a dude's version, a dude's take on
Right.
Sense and Sensibility.
Yep.
But that's fine. So anyway, okay, here's the book. So you had this family, the Dashwoods. And the Dashwoods lived in this big, beautiful estate, beautiful country house. They had some cash. And Big Daddy Dashwood is dying. And Father Dashwood, whose name I can't remember, had two marriages. He had
Henry?
I'm sure.
Okay.
And he had his first marriage, and his wife died. And from that marriage, he had a son named John. And John Dashwood is his only son. And John Dashwood is set to inherit the entire major big ol' estate. But Henry Dashwood, the dad, who's dying, also had been married to another woman who she's known as just Mrs. Dashwood through the book. I'm sure she's got a first name, but I cannot remember it. And she and Dad Dashwood had 3 daughters: Eleanor, Marianne, and Margaret, who doesn't count. I'm sure Margaret counts, but she's not a big character in the story. You got Eleanor and Marianne, who are the big main characters of the story. Anyway, Father Dashwood is on his deathbed, and he brings John in, and he's like, John, you have to promise me that when I die, my estate's going to you, but you have to take care of your stepsisters. Take care of them. And John, like the deathbed, like he's like, swear it on your honor. And John's like, yeah, no, of course. I definitely will take care of it. Okay, if Dad told you to do that, quote unquote, take care of your sisters. Now, if we were in a mobster movie, that would make
Have them whacked.
Yeah, exactly.
I was just going to say,
take care of them.
taking a dirt nap.
If Dad said take care of your sisters, how would you interpret that? What does that mean?
There's like a certain amount of money they need, and like I need to give them that money.
That's right.
Yeah, provide housing and like safety.
I need to make sure, and this is initially how John takes it. John's like, I'm going to set aside a set of my estate, and I'm going to take care of my sisters. Okay. So initially he's like, I'm going to set aside enough money so that my sisters can live off of, I think the number was like £2,000 a year, which is not lavish, but it's enough that they could have a house and they could have like 1 or 2 servants and they wouldn't be destitute. The anxieties about money are through so many of Jane Austen's books. And so I did a little bit of research just looking into like when they say, quote, 2,000 a year, or when somebody marries somebody very wealthy and they're like, oh, they've got 30,000 a year. I looked into like where that money comes from. And there's usually sort of 2 ways of it. One is rents from land. And that was, so you are a giant landowner. So Darcy in Pride and Prejudice, who gets 10,000 a year, gets that from, he gets people paying him rent every year to farm the land. And he lives off of that. And that was considered the more noble way of earning money. As a landed gentry, if you were getting tenants' money, you were sort of a good guy. You also had responsibilities that you sort of had to give back and take care and help, this kind of stuff. But more or less, you just sort of were this landowner. The other way was through some sort of annuity, a bond, that you had 20,000 pounds, and you had it in a bond that paid you 5% a year. And that was your 1,000 or whatever, right? And that was your, so you had this lump sum of money. And so there's this idea that John Dashwood is going to take, let's say, 20 to 40 grand of his estate, put it into some sort of bond, pay a government bond or some sort of annuity, give that to his sisters, and they would be able to live off of that. If they got married, that money still goes with them, but this was sort of like a safety net. Dad says, promise me this, and John's like, I will, and then Dad dies. And John's like, all right, gotta do this. All right. Unfortunately, John is married to a woman who has the unfortunate name of Fanny. So Fanny Dashwood,
Tough.
she is very obsessed with money. She's very concerned about money, and they have a child who is essentially like a tiny troll. They have this little nasty little child who's not really a character in the book, but Fanny loves her little nasty child. And she slowly, throughout the course of many months, sort of asks questions of John of like, what do you think your dad meant? Surely he didn't mean 40,000 pounds. You're really going to take that away from little, Francis or whatever the kid's name is? Maybe it's also Henry. Probably Henry. Are you really going to take this money away from your own flesh and blood and give it to your sisters? Surely your father meant something else. And so she starts to whittle him down from like 2,000 a year to 1,000 a year to 500 a year. And eventually John is like, oh no, you're so right, Fanny, you're so right. And eventually John settles through Fanny's guidance that I'm going to every once in a while give them gifts of 100 pounds.
Wow.
Brutal.
Which he never does.
Oh.
Because when you say, I'm going to set up a thing that automatically pays, it's going to happen. And when you say, every now and then when the mood strikes or when I feel like it's necessary, I'm going to give £100 to my stepsisters. But of course, if you are married to somebody who's obsessed with money and you yourself are kind of obsessed with security and you're kind of like, you're kind of a, not the strongest, you have deference to your strong-willed wife. You're going to find an excuse to not give your £100 to your sisters whenever you can.
Right.
And your stepmother. Anyway, so as it goes on, meanwhile, he doesn't tell his sisters. So the sisters and mom are living in their house, which was their house because their father just died. But now John has inherited it. And Fanny moves in and she's already like measuring the drapes and saying like, this is my room. And little, Francis, this can be your playroom. And it was like Mary Ann's room or whatever. So everybody is really upset with this. And Francis is like, oh, you guys can totally stay here as long as you want until you find out whatever your situation is coming up next. And everyone's kind of waiting to see like, all right, so John, are you going to get like, what is the inheritance given? And John says, I'm going to help you find the place. And every now and then, he doesn't even say every now and then I'm going to give you money. He's just sort of like, I'm here for you. Anyway, when are you guys leaving? Right? So they're now in their own family home, and mom is like, I can't live here. This used to be my house, and now I'm a guest in my own house. We got to leave. All right. Let's talk about the sisters. You have Eleanor, and you have Mary Ann, and you have Margaret, who doesn't count. Yeah.
Tough.
Eleanor
Margaret,
and
yeah.
Mary Ann are sisters, and they are very, very different. Yeah. Eleanor is sensible. She is rational. She is guarded in her emotions. She is very trustworthy. Everything that if you say something to Eleanor in confidence, it is going to stay in confidence forever. She is not letting her emotions run away with her. She is going to do the right thing, the logical thing. And then there's Mary Ann. And Mary Ann Dashwood is romantic. And Mary Ann is all sense while her sister is sensible. She is all about emotions and feelings and, and she is more, her mom is more like her. And mom and Mary Ann are like, we can't live in this house anymore. They stole our house. They're monsters. And so they're very much sort of reacting emotionally to what is an emotional situation. And Eleanor is like, we got, that's fine, but we have nowhere to go. What should we do? We don't have any money. We got to sort of figure out what's going to happen. So we're like, we're going to rent a house. So they all go out to, they log on to Zillow and they look around to see what's out there. And mom, who's a little flighty, and Mary Ann, or a little emotional, and Mary Ann, who is very emotional, they find all sorts of houses. And they're like, oh, Eleanor, this place is perfect. It has an elevator and like 40 servants. And Eleanor's like, we can't afford this. Right. We have to think lower. And they're rich people. Like, they came from fancy houses with servants and yards and fruit trees. And Mary Ann is like absolutely distraught that she's going to like lose her favorite trees. And she's like, they're like, I can't bear them cutting down my trees. And, so Mary Ann is in a rough spot. Yep. Mary Ann being in a rough spot is going to be a common theme. And Eleanor's like, we got to lower our standards. And they're looking at all these places.
In the words of Eminem, they got to stop living up here and start living down here.
Meanwhile, while they're staying in this house, Fanny's brother shows up, and his name is Edward. So Fanny used to be Fanny Ferrars before she married Dashwood. And so Edward Ferrars shows up. Edward's an interesting guy. He's from Fanny's family is super wealthy. So Fanny married John Dashwood, really rich, but always worried about.
And she's still worried about money.
And she's worried about money. Oh yeah.
Real piece of work, this Fanny.
Well, because Fanny, she's not going to inherit because she's a lady. Edward comes in, he's the oldest brother, and he is going to inherit this vast, vast, vast fortune. And he has an overbearing mother. So much like how Fanny is kind of like has John wrapped around her finger, Mrs. Ferrars has Edward, he's overbearing, and she has said, Edward, you are going to become a great man. You are going to become a member of parliament. You are going to be, maybe prime minister one day. Like, you've got great things. And Edward does not want any of this. Edward's like, I want to read books. Edward is like, I want to be a dancer. No, he doesn't want to dance. But he doesn't.
Baking is my passion, Mummy.
Exactly. He's like, I kind of like small town life. And everyone's like, meh, sucks for you because you're going to be a member of parliament.
Yep.
And so he's like, this sucks. Anyway, he's hanging around the house with these beautiful, now almost to be impoverished girls. And he's kind of shy and awkward. He doesn't really know how to talk to girls. When he shows up, everyone's like, ooh, here comes big Richie Edward one day who's going to be so rich and great. And Marianne has no interest in him. And Eleanor is kind of like, he probably thinks he's so great because he's so rich. Turns out she was completely wrong. He's humble. When they sort of talk about life, he's like, honestly, I kind of want a simple life. I want to live in a small town. When Eleanor says, oh, we're going to have to go move into like a cottage, we can't live in these great houses, he's like, honestly, that sounds kind of great. Like, just living a simple life with like animals and food and being around like a small town. He's like, I wish that was me. And Eleanor's like, gawooga, right? So, so Edward and Eleanor are hanging out all day and they're talking, but Edward's the kind of guy where it's like, is he just not know what he's saying, or is this his attempt at flirting? We don't know because we suspect Edward himself doesn't realize what he's doing. Everyone sees Eleanor and Edward kind of like talking in the garden all day, and Mrs. Dashwood, mom, is like, yeah, boy. Like she is money. Yeah, she is like, my girl, because how can you stick it to your stepson's wife by being like, you know what, that fortune you're not inheriting, my daughter's going to inherit it. You know, like, take that, Fanny. And so Fanny makes sure at breakfast that she saddles up to Mrs. Dashwood and be like, you know, my mother has greater things for Edward than... And then she sort of implies, like, you know, normal people.
Yes.
Marrying a normie.
Yeah. And so Mrs. Dashwood's like, I understand you completely. And Fanny's like, how long you guys think you're going to stay around for? Anyway, not a happy place to be involved in. And then mom's like, we got to go now. They have a big fight about, like, furniture. And mom's like, we got to get out of here. All right.
Wait, who fights about furniture?
Mom, Dashwood, and Fanny.
Okay.
Fighting about furniture. Anyway, Edward and Eleanor kind of seem to be hitting it off, but Edward is just not making the move. Then all of a sudden they get a letter in the mail from mom's cousin, Sir John Middleton. And he's like, hey, listen, cuz I hear what happened. I hear you're not inheriting the house. That kind of sucks. I got a cottage. It's yours. What? Come move close to me. You're close to my estate. You can come over for dinner. The trouble is it's kind of off in the boonies. It's off in Devon. Eleanor takes a look at the paperwork and she's like, Mom, this is a really great idea. We can afford this. And Marianne's like, oh yes, we can live by the ocean. Marianne is so excited and she's like, we can like trounce on the moors all day long. And she's got this whole romantic vision of what living by Devon would be like. And Eleanor's like, I actually think it's going to be kind of hard. Right. It's windy, it's cold, but we can afford it. And Mom's like, I don't care. We're getting out of here. So Eleanor goes to Edward and is like, we're moving. And Edward is like, this is a tremendous sadness. And Eleanor's like, I agree. I wish we didn't have to leave. And Edward's like, yeah. Well, bye. And Eleanor's like, what the heck, man? Like, are you not gonna, you know? Like, she's sort of waiting for the proposal.
Tell me he gives her £100.
So, like, no, he doesn't.
Tell me
he doesn't.
I'm sorry. Here's £100.
And he's like,
he's
he's like, parting from you is one of the great sadnesses of my life. And she's like, am I friend zone? Like, what's going on? Like, tell me you love me. We can get married. And he's like, well, you know, ciao.
He just doesn't realize.
He doesn't realize it, or he realizes that like if he did, Mom would like go crazy.
Edward Cute Boy. I was thinking John the brother.
No, Edward.
Oh, not John. Okay, Edward. Got it. I thought she went to her brother, and she's like, I gotta go, and he's like, that's so sad. Here's £100.
No, exactly. So then they all go off to the country, and it is not what they expected. And Marianne's like, okay, but to her credit, she's gonna make the best of it.
Good.
They're all gonna make the best of it. Mom has the hardest time with it. Margaret is like, this is, little Margaret that no one cares about. She's like, this is awesome. She doesn't know any different. She's a kid. She's like running around the beach collecting shells.
Sounds great.
And Eleanor and Margaret, they're like, where are the servants? And Eleanor's like, where are the servants now? They got like one guy that comes around and helps them with like household stuff, but they've got to like cook and clean, and they're not used to it. But Eleanor's like, we can make the best of it. They go to this house, and they meet Sir John Middleton. Without getting too much into it, John Middleton is a fantastically fun character. He only cares about one thing in this life, and that is hunting. He loves to hunt. Actually, two things. He loves hunting, and he loves inviting people to the house. Awesome. He always wants to have people over. But he's kind of
a great guy, this chap.
Yeah, he's kind of uncouth. He lives in a big old house, but he's not very mannered. He tracks mud through his house, and he like probably gets into overly descriptive ways about hunting, especially around girls, and they're like, we don't care.
Right. Then I ripped it from stem to stern.
Exactly.
De-gutted it, and wolves get like.
And they're like eating, they're like little sorbet or whatever. Yeah. And then he just loves having people over, and he only remembers people based on what kinds of dogs they have. And he's like, oh, that's the guy that has that real great like hunting bitch, and he says this a lot, and it's very funny. We can say that.
Are we allowed to say that on this podcast?
You're talking about a dog, right?
We're talking about dogs.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, that's a common phrase in the book, which is very humorous. That's how he remembers people. He's like, oh, he's got that great dog.
Okay.
I was gonna say, is this person me?
No,
like, remembering
maybe
people
it's
buy
me.
their dogs.
Maybe
like that's I meet a lot of dogs.
Anyway, but he's kind of like taxing, and so the ladies don't always want to go over for dinner, and his wife is kind of cold and aloof, and really likes fine, fancy things, but she's like rich, but she lives in the country with a hunter husband. So they're not like fancy London, but they're rich, and they're like rich country.
Okay.
So like, I don't know, like what's like whatever, like a southern wealthy
like
family that loves hunting, but they're not very fancy.
Yeah.
Like that kind
Big
of
ranch.
thing.
Yeah, they're a ranch family.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, his mother-in-law is Mrs. Jennings, and she's there, and she loves to meddle. She's like, oh, Eleanor, Marianne, we are going to marry you off. We're going to find you anybody. And Eleanor's like,
Wait, who's meddling? Her cousin?
Sir John Middleton, a hunter guy, his mother-in-law loves to meddle.
Got it, okay.
So Mrs. Jennings loves to meddle. And they sort of hear that Eleanor had a thing with somebody whose last name begins with F. This is something that Mrs. Jennings loves to do. She doesn't want, she like knows who people were flirting with, but she loves to leave these little hints. And Eleanor's like, oh my goodness, he didn't propose. We didn't even exchange pleasantries. Like, but she's not going to say anything. She's keeping it to herself. And everyone's making little jokes like, any word from Mr. F? And Eleanor's like, just trying to ignore it. Anyway, Edward had said he was going to visit. And in the quiet moments of the night, Marianne's like, do you think Edward's going to visit? And Eleanor's like, we didn't say anything. He didn't tell me anything. We're just friends as far as I know. He may visit, he may not. He keeps his counsel to himself. I can't hold out hope for something that isn't there. And Marianne's like, oh yeah, you can. You totally. She's like, I'm a hold out hope. And Eleanor's like, that's not sensible. That's not smart. That's not wise. And Marianne's like, it's hot. Like, it's cute. It's like,
what are we doing out here? What are we going to be wise all the time? What better do I have to do?
Exactly.
We're doing dishes. Let's
Marianne's. So then, okay. And then another guy shows up, and his name is Colonel Brandon. And Colonel Brandon shows up, but he's older. He's like in his 30s.
Oh.
Colonel Brandon is very mysterious.
Oh.
And he's very sort of gruff. But he's a colonel. Dude spent time in India. Wow. He's thrown down. There are stories about Colonel Brandon. They're pretty sure Colonel Brandon's like been in duels.
Am I allowed to believe he dabbles in black magic?
He doesn't dabble in black magic, but but in one of the popular versions of the movie, he is played by Alan Rickman. He's played by Severus Snape himself.
That's great.
Anyway, Colonel Brandon shows up, and he's kind of like broody. He's very much like a Heathcliff. Even though Austen doesn't write those kinds of characters, he's like the closest to your like Lord Byron, broody, handsome man. Mm-hmm. And he's off there like, swirling his drink in the corner, living mysteriously. And everyone's like, that's Brandon. Mm-hmm. Brandon's cool.
He owns land, we think.
Yeah. And Eleanor's like, he seems nice. And they seem to have a good rapport, but he doesn't seem to take any interest in Eleanor. But he cannot take his eyes off Marianne. He's like, who is she? Marianne's very young. She's like 17. Oh. And Brandon's 30. And everyone's like, that's not going to work.
Right.
He's like, maybe it could work in a pinch, but that's not going to work. And Marianne is the life of the party, and she is beautiful, and she plays piano, and she is charming and laughs, and she is a ray of sunshine on the windy Devon coast. And Brandon's like, who is she? And he always can't take her eyes off of her, and everybody's beginning to notice. Eleanor goes to Marianne. Eleanor's like, listen, what do you think about Brandon? She's like, Brandon? The dude's like an old man. He's like in his 30s. Right. And Marianne says, no, there's no man in this world that I will love. Men, they just don't make good men anymore. Wow. She's like, there is no man who has the temperament. There's no man who wants to feel, Eleanor. No man who cares about art and poetry and music and life. They just care about like hunting and sheep and money. And so she's just like, there's no man for me. And Eleanor's like, all right, fine, whatever. But Eleanor says like, money's a kind of a pretty awesome thing. And we would be better if we had some. And Marianne's like, oh, Eleanor, you're so like bland. You're so lame. Money doesn't mean everything. And Eleanor's like, you would think differently if you were the one that's like in charge of. Like,
it means something.
Yeah, it means something every month. We got to go buy groceries. Right. And Marianne's like, no, we should live on passion. Anyway, so Marianne is like, no man will ever marry me. And Brandon is like, I love her. But but he's too old and he knows it, and it's not going to work. But there's always like, and when Eleanor is like, they sort of talk about it, and he's like, who's that woman? He's like, that's my sister Marianne. He's like, she reminds me of somebody I knew before. And then he like trundles off, and Eleanor's like, that's weird.
Pretty great. That's great.
Anyway, so, and then of course Mrs. Jennings is like, that could work. We could, but it's like, people have gotten married at those ages, and Marianne's like, not happening. Brandon is old. Okay. Then one day, Marianne and Margaret, who no one remembers, is going off. They're going off for a walk in the moors, off on a walk on the beach. And Marianne, it's very funny. At the beginning of the walk, Marianne's like, it's a gorgeous day. And then like 20 minutes in, it starts pouring rain. And she's like, I love the rain. It's so refreshing and bracing, right? And so she's off on the hills. And I can just imagine poor Margaret be like, Marianne, can we go home yet? Right. And Marianne's just like, la, 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 I'm a forest lady. And so she's...
Margaret's the one that doesn't matter?
Margaret doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Marianne is floating through the woods, and she's just like, I love the ocean. And she's like looking at the ocean, and she trips and she falls down the hill. Oh. And she rolls her ankle and she can't get up, and it's pouring rain.
Oh, this is a meet cute if I've ever heard one.
And then she's laying on the ground, and she hears horse hooves coming up. And who comes up but this young, handsome, dashing man, and he picks her up in his arms, and he says, where do you live? I can take you home. And she's like, I live over there. And he like takes her on. He like carries her through the rain to her house. And she's
That's incredible. I live over there.
And she's just looking up at him. And he's carrying her in his arms. And he kicks down the door to the cottage. And he places Marianne by the fire. And he's like, she needs water. She needs medicine. Uh-huh. And then Eleanor and Mom come in and take care of him. And then he's like, I'm so sorry to come in this way. And he's all handsome and wet. And all the ladies are like, she's okay, and then Marianne tells a story, and then they look and they say, who are you? He says, oh, I'm so sorry. My name is Willoughby. And then Willoughby leaves. He's like, I'll check on you tomorrow. And then Willoughby sort of floats out the door. And Mom and Marianne look at each other and go, oh, and Eleanor's like, who's this guy? Yeah. And then Mom's like, did you see the way he was looking at you? And Marianne's like, I finally found a man. An Adonis.
After knowing him for a couple of minutes.
We carried her to the house. Yeah. She's 17. Anyway, so Willoughby shows up the next day and like only has eyes for Marianne. And he comes and he like talks to her. Turns out he loves reading the poetry of Wordsworth and all of the romantics. He loves music. And him and Marianne get real close real fast. John Middleton, the guy who loves to hunt, he knows Willoughby. He's like, Willoughby's in town? Awesome. That's great. We should have him over. Does he still have that awesome dog?
I love this guy. This is great.
He's my man. And Brandon hears that Willoughby's in town. They're like, you know him? He's like, yeah, I know Willoughby. And they're like, and Eleanor detects
I know Willoughby from...
Before, exactly. That's exactly what happens. Yeah. And Eleanor's like, something's off there, Brandon and Willoughby. And when they meet each other, they're like, what's up, Brandon? And he's like, what's up, Willoughby? And they're like, not cool about something's up, not happy. Something between Brandon and Willoughby. We don't really know what.
Okay.
But Brandon's old. Willoughby's 24.
What's the name of the hunting guy again?
John Middleton.
And so John's like, you guys bring your dogs?
Yeah, exactly. He has them all over for dinner all the time.
That's right.
There's like a little bit of coldness between Brandon and Willoughby, whatever. Anyway, meanwhile, Willoughby keeps showing up. He brings Marianne. He buys her music to play on the he buys her a piano forte. He's like, this house needs a piano.
Wow.
He buys her a piano.
There's a lot of buying of piano fortes in Jane Austen books.
It's just cute. I don't know. It's like way to flirt.
Sign of love.
That's a big way to flirt. Like it's a lot of there's a lot of moving to flirt that way.
That's right. So he buys her a piano. She plays music. They do duets in the foyer. And mom turns out that Willoughby is going to inherit like a stinking fortune. And meanwhile, everyone's like, is Edward ever going to come visit us? Does he really like Eleanor? Maybe not. Maybe he was just flirting with her, but he was like, but it's like, Edward must have known he was leading Eleanor on. And Eleanor's like, but he wasn't. We can't hold that against him. And everyone's like, what a dink. But mom is really mean. Eleanor's like, you can't be mean to him because it's not like we exchanged anything. We didn't exchange vows. He's free to come and go as he pleases.
And he might, like many men, just not realize when signals are coming his way.
Exactly. Or clearly he maybe just didn't value the friendship as much as I did, and I read it the wrong way. He was probably just being nice, and I thought he was flirting. Sometimes guys are idiots. And we don't know when we're flirting. Girls think we're flirting when we're not. We don't know. As men, when we
guys
flirt,
are bad at this.
We have to. We are like trying. It is obvious when we're flirting. When we're not flirting, and you think we're flirting, we're not flirting. We're just dumb. We're like, you like music? Like we're not flirting.
We're just trying to think of something to say out of our face that doesn't sound
exactly.
dumb.
Anyway, flirting is like, can I hold your hand? And it's like that's flirting. But anyway, whatever. So Eleanor's like,
what do you think of kissing?
Yeah. And us.
Do you like it? Yeah. What if we did that?
Yeah, that is, yes. Anyway, but Edward is not doing that. Yeah. All right. Meanwhile, Marianne and Willoughby are getting super close. And it's like getting to the point where everybody realizes it, so much so that their engagement is an open secret. And if everyone's like, they're probably engaged. They are acting as if Willoughby has asked her to marry her, and she has said yes. And everyone's like, hey, Mom, has Willoughby said anything? Mom's like, no, I'm waiting any day now. And Eleanor is like, Marianne, we need to talk.
Yeah.
Has Willoughby
alarm bells?
Has Willoughby said anything? And Marianne's like, he doesn't have to say anything. And Marianne's like, no, he does.
Actually,
he does have to say something.
Yes.
And she's like, how well do you know this man? And Marianne's like, I know him more than I know anybody on this world.
Right.
He knows me perhaps even more than you do, Eleanor. We are of one soul. And Eleanor's like, hopefully it's not you are
right.
Hopefully you're not like of one soul in any other ways.
Right.
And there's this I'm gonna get these details wrong, but there was gonna be this party that Brandon was gonna host because he's really rich, and Brandon's like, we're gonna have a party. But then they're all getting together to do this party, and then Brandon gets this letter in the mail. And he's like, I have to leave. And they're like, can you leave after the party? He's like, I have to leave right now. It's a matter of life and death. And he gets on his horse and like rides off, all like mysterious. And Willoughby's like, well, thank goodness Brandon's gone. Friggin' hate that guy. And then, instead, Marianne, let's hang out together. There's rumors that Willoughby has shown Marianne the house that he is going to one day inherit. And everyone sort of interprets that as like he's showing the house that she will one day be lady of.
Right.
And people are like, they're getting married. So much so that like people are saying to Mom and Eleanor, so when's the wedding? When's the engagement? They're like, we have not had any formal engagement. And Marianne is like, I don't need your conventions. Like we are of one spirit. And Eleanor's like, okay, this isn't good. This is not great. Anyway, after Colonel Brandon leaves, and Willoughby, I can't remember if this is before Willoughby leaves or not. It doesn't matter. But Edward does show up. I think we'll say this. If I'm wrong, we can give me classical stuff I got wrong. But one day, Willoughby says, Marianne, I need to talk to you alone. And everyone's like, oh, here it's coming. And so Mom's like, we're going for a walk. And so off they go. And when they come back from the walk, Marianne is bawling her eyes out upstairs. And Willoughby says, I need to leave. I got a letter from my aunt patron who has all the money I'm inheriting, and she says I need to leave and do business in London. I don't know when I'm coming back. Bye. And he leaves, and Eleanor's like, hey, Marianne, so what's going on? She's like, he's just left. Oh, he doesn't know when he's coming back. But they don't know if they're, like, Eleanor's not asking if they're engaged or not, or if he, like, gave a promise or anything, because she's like, it's none of my business. If Marianne wants to tell me, Marianne will tell me. Marianne is, like, sad. So Marianne spends a bunch of time dopey sad. I think at this point, Colonel Brandon shows up and tries to cheer up by bringing her music, and she's like, Colonel Brandon is the last person I want to see right now. Yeah. So Marianne is kind of rude to people, and she's just sort of, like, wallowing in sadness, and she's kind of rude to everybody. Then Edward shows up. Turns out, and Edward is like, hey, I came to visit. And Eleanor's like, this is awesome. Did you just come to see us? He's like, no, I had business in Devon.
Come on.
And she's like, oh. And he's like, I thought I'd swing by. And so for the first day, he's kind of like aloof and kind of cold. But as time goes on, he warms up. And he goes from being kind of like sad and mopey to being really happy again. And he's like, I freaking love you guys. He doesn't say that. But he's just like, you are a great family. This is an enjoyable, like, this has done wonders to my heart.
Bye.
So bye. Yeah, exactly. Right. Ciao. Peace.
These poor girls.
So these poor girls are getting jerked around.
Yes.
All right. And so this sucks. Then these two girls show up named Anne and Lucy Steele. And Lucy Steele is somehow cousins to Mrs. Jennings. So Mrs. Jennings is the mother-in-law of Sir John Middleton, who's the hunter. Anyway, these girls
she's the mom who always does the like.
Yeah, she's the mom that's like, who's Mr. F? Yeah. Right? And she's the one that's like trying to hook everybody up with everybody. These girls show up, and they are like rich, but they are vulgar. They just don't know how to talk in company. They sort of are, they kind of say rude things. They're not themselves like rude, but they're just sort of uncultured, and everyone's like, oh, they're lovely ladies. Eleanor and Marianne, you would love the Steele girls, and they do not get along because the Steele girls just love talking about their boy. They're like all the boys. They just want, and like they call them their beaux. The world is full of beaux. Oh, maybe he could be my beau. And Anne is like, I'm going to wear pink because it's the color that the doctor in town loves the most, and maybe he could be my beau. And Eleanor is like, I can't stand you people.
They sound insufferable.
Yes, they're insufferable. Yeah. And Lucy sidles up to Eleanor, and she's like, oh, Eleanor, I've heard so much about you. I've heard that I should be friends with you. And Eleanor's like, cool. That's great. And Eleanor tries to be friends, but Lucy is just so friggin' annoying and whatever. Anyway, so they're not fun. The Steele girls are kicking around, and this life kind of sucks for the Dashwoods, right? These boys that they like have been jerking them around. They've got no prospects. They're kind of living poor.
Colonel Brandon's around, but nobody knows
Colonel
what his
Brandon
deal
is just like, like slipping in and out of shadows. Like, it's just what's going on.
He sounds super cool.
Yeah.
This is great.
Okay. And then Mrs. Jennings is like, listen, we got to get some fun going. Let's go to London. You can stay in my house in London.
Awesome.
We'll see people. Marianne's like, yes. Willoughby's in London. Yes, we're going. And Eleanor's like,
that feels bad.
Eleanor's like, maybe I should stay. And everyone's like, no, you go to London. And then Mrs. Jennings like, I think Mr. F is in London.
That's right,
and so it's like, fine. We're all going to London. John Dashwood, their brother-in-law, who gives them no money, is also in London. They all go there. They have dinner parties. And then there's one big fancy ball. Meanwhile, Marianne's sending letters saying like, Willoughby, I'm there. Return to me. And she's not getting any letters in return. Every day she goes to the little porter. She's like, has a letter come? And he's like, yeah, a letter came. For me? No, sorry, for Mrs. Jennings. And Marianne's like, what could happen? What could be going on? Maybe my letters are getting lost in the mail.
That postmaster sounds like if a girl comes in, she's like, has a letter come? I'm not going to be like, yep, not for you, you dummy. That's...
Anyway.
Come on, man.
There's a party.
A little decorum.
Willoughby's going to be there. Marianne gets all like prettied up. They go to the party. Marianne, their people are like trying to introduce, this is like a fancy ball where you're supposed to make these introductions and make these connections. Marianne don't care. Right. Marianne is blowing through the party. Willoughby, where are you? Like she's looking for Willoughby. And meanwhile, Eleanor's like, got a bad feeling about this. They see Willoughby. Willoughby clearly sees them and like goes upstairs.
Oh no.
And Marianne's like, there he is. And so she follows him and she's like,
He's
Willoughby.
got another girl.
And he turns around and he's with this other woman.
Yeah.
And he comes up and he's like, "Oh,
Come on.
young Miss Dashwood, how delightful to see you." And she's like, "Willoughby, what's going on?"
Yeah. And
And he's like, "Whatever do you mean?" And she's like, "Did you not get my letters?" And he's like, "Oh yes, I did receive your correspondence." And she's like, and he's like, "I am so sorry if he sort of is like
misunderstood
yeah. anything, but this is clearly not happening." And he is now going to marry Miss Lady Grey, who has a vast fortune, and there she is, all cold and stern like an angry swan. And Miss Grey is like, "Who is this country girl?" And
I'm loving the voices today. This is really spot on.
I'm so
great.
engaged with this story.
Really,
like,
this is
and
great.
Marianne is off. Marianne cannot stay for the party. She ain't staying for dinner.
Yeah.
Marianne bawls her eyes out and needs to go home, and Eleanor takes her home.
I feel like that boy needs to get slapped.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
Yeah. Eleanor is not happy. And then when they go home, Eleanor sort of like, "Hey, Marianne, did you like promise yourself to? Did he like promise himself? Were you going to get engaged? Did he do anything wrong where he's breaking his word?" And she's like, "No, he never proposed, but he did ask for a lock of my hair, which I gave. But he returns it in a letter. He's like, I think this is yours." And he sort of sends all of her letters back, and
the
Marianne is heartbroken.
Yeah.
All right. One thing I forgot to mention is when Edward is at the house earlier, he's got this ring, and it's got a lock of hair in it.
What?
In it, and everyone's like, he's got a lock of hair in the ring, and it looks exactly like Eleanor's hair. And then Eleanor's like, "I did not give Edward a
did
lock
that
of my
come
hair." But it's quite possible that Edward got a lock of my hair somehow, but it's still kind of weird. Yeah.
Just creeping around
Yeah.
with scissors
Yeah.
while she's sleeping.
And so Marianne's like, "Hey," when Marianne's there, she's like, "Hey, Edward."
This.
He's like, "Hey, Edward." Marianne thinks it's Eleanor's hair. She's like, "Hey, Edward, whose hair is that?" He's clearly embarrassed. He's like, "It's my sister's." What? And they're like, "Your sister's blonde." And he's like, "No, it's changed in time, whatever." And everyone's like, "He has a lock of your hair." And Eleanor's like, "Maybe it's also weird because I didn't give it to him." Meanwhile, Marianne gave it to, she would have shaved her head for Willoughby.
That's right.
Anyway, Willoughby sends back the lock of her hair. Marianne is in trouble. She is sick in bed. Meanwhile, Lucy Steele comes up as the days go on, comes up to Eleanor and says, "Eleanor, I need to confide in you." And Eleanor's like, "I really don't want you to." But Lucy's like,
avoided?
"I have a secret to tell you. I have been secretly engaged to Edward Ferrars for 5 years."
What?
And Eleanor's like, heartbroken.
Yeah, it's terrible.
Which means that the entire time that she met and knew Edwards, he was secretly engaged to Lucy. And she doesn't really know the story. For sake of our episode, I'm just going to tell you what the story was. She finds it out as the book kind of goes on in bits and pieces. Edward goes off to school as a 19-year-old with an overbearing mom, and he goes and he lives at this house of this tutor. And Lucy is like, "Fortune, fortune, fortune." She sees Edward and she's like, "He rich."
Yeah.
And so she's basically the first girl that's ever nice to him, and is the first girl that's like, "What's up, Edward? You kind of cute." And he's like, "Let's get married." And she's like, "Yep, done." And so Edward, as being like a dopey 19-year-old, the first girl that ever said "I love you," he proposes to.
Okay.
And is regretting it, but he's honor bound to do it.
Got it.
So when he was in Devon to go see, and he's like, I was in Devon. That's why before I came to see you, he was going to see Lucy to be like, "Hey, are we still?" He's like, "I gave you my word." And she's like, "Yeah, we're still getting married." And it's the first time he's seen her in 4 years. And he's like, "Okay, cool." And she gives him a lock of her hair.
That's where it is. Got
Anyway,
it. Yes.
Lucy says to Eleanor, "Don't tell anybody. I'm in town to try to win his cold-hearted, angry mother to my side." And Eleanor's like, "No, your secret's safe with me." And she is just absolutely crushed. She can't tell Marianne because she just said, "Your secret's safe with me." Meanwhile, Marianne is in absolute hysterics over Willoughby, and everybody knows it, and everybody is doting on Marianne. Mrs. Jennings is bringing her special meals, and she's laying in bed and she's weeping and wailing and crying. She's really leaning on the emotional support of Eleanor. And meanwhile, Eleanor is going through her own private heartbreak that she can't let anybody know about. And Eleanor is just taking it. Yep. She's just suffering it in silence. There's this really wonderful scene where Mrs. Jennings is going to bring Marianne a glass of really nice wine. She's like, I opened this bottle of wine because it's really nice, and I bet Marianne would like it because she's so sad about Willoughby. And they're going up to give it to Marianne. They open the door, and Marianne's asleep. And Eleanor is like, you know what? I'll have the glass of wine instead. And Eleanor gets this sort of private moment where she gets to enjoy the wine, the wine that was supposed to like help Marianne in her heartbreak. She gets to drink the wine herself for her own heartbreak. Wow. And she kind of has this private moment where she gets to enjoy, even though it wasn't intended for her to sort of alleviate her suffering, she sort of sees it as a way to alleviate her suffering by taking the wine, but it's her own private moment. So poor Eleanor. Yeah. Anyway, all right. Marianne is absolutely beside herself, and she is sad about this. Lucy Steele tries to ingratiate herself to Mrs. Ferrars, cold-blooded Mrs. Ferrars, and it doesn't go very well because she is an uncouth, vulgar child from the country. And my son is going to be a member of Parliament. So, whatever. Lucy is going to the house and she's just basically like praising everything. And Mrs. Ferrars is like, whatever, cool. All right, is this dinner party done yet? Yeah. Her sister Anne is like, it's working like a charm. She loves Lucy, and accidentally lets it slip that Lucy and Edward are engaged. Mom freaks out and says, if you marry Lucy, you are disinherited from your fortune. And Edward says, I made a promise, and I'm going to see that promise through. And Mom's like, fine, you're dead to me. Your fortune's now going to your kid brother. Bye. And Edward is disinherited and kicked out. And he goes to Lucy, and he's like, listen, Lucy, we're going to get married. I promise myself to you.
Is she going to turn him down?
I promise myself to you, but I don't have any money anymore. And she's like, okay, all right, well, okay, we'll see what goes on. We can figure out what's going to happen. Meanwhile, Colonel Brandon hears about this, and he's like, Edward Ferrars, you're a man. He's like, that is so cool that you're like holding to your principles. I have an open vacancy in my parish that needs a priest, needs a parson, needs an Anglican minister. And Edward is like, I want to be I would love to go into the church. And so Colonel Brand's like, all right, you go get ordained. I've got a house. I've only got like 700 pounds a year for you, but at least it's a living. You can live the simple country life you always wanted. Yeah. And you and Lucy can live in the country. And Brandon and Edward's like, okay. Now, Colonel Brandon is going to tell Edward this, but he asks Eleanor to deliver the news to Edward on his behalf because he has to go out of town.
Oh, good heavens.
And he has no idea. No one has any idea.
Yeah. So, poor Eleanor.
So Edward shows up. Basically, Eleanor sends for Edward, says, can you come to the house? I have to tell you something. And Edward's like, okay. And he shows up. And he's like, he comes in and he's like, Eleanor, I feel like, he's like, there's so many things I want to tell you. And she's like, and then she says this thing that, Colonel Brandon is giving you this kind of stuff. And Edward's like, oh, that's what you wanted to talk to me about. Right. He's like, oh, well, thank you so much. That's really, I'm glad to hear it. There's another scene where like Lucy and Eleanor are together and Edward comes in, like wants to talk to Eleanor, but sees Lucy there. And he's like, actually, I have to go. Yeah. And so there's times where Edward seems to want to tell Eleanor things. Anyway, Eleanor gives us news, and Edward's like, oh, that's great news. And Eleanor's like, so now you can have a life, and you're not going to be destitute. And he's like, all right, well, I can marry Miss Steele after all. And Eleanor's like, yep, guess so. And Edward's like, all right, well, I better go get ordained. And off he goes. And Eleanor is secondly heartbroken. All right. Meanwhile, Willoughby marries Miss Grey, and Mrs. Jennings like, I think it's time to get out of London, and Marianne's like, yes, take me home. I don't want to be in London anymore. This place is terrible. I want to go back to the ocean. And so, so fine. So they're going to go off, but in the meantime, they're going to like stay at this little estate in the country, because it's a long way back to Devon. And as they go back to this estate, Marianne's working through all this sadness, and Marianne gets sick. Very sick. She gets a cold and a fever, and at the estate, it's like Mrs. Jennings and her daughter or cousin, whose estate it is, and Eleanor, and Colonel Brandon's there for some reason, just because he's always around. And Marianne is sick, and it seems like Marianne's going to die. And Marianne is on death's door, and Brandon is like really upset about this whole thing. And he goes back, and they're like, we should probably get Mom here because Marianne might die. And Brandon's like, we don't have time for that. And so he gets on his horse, and he rides off to go get Mom. He's like, I'll bring her. And so he rides off into the rain, into the night on his horse, to go get Mom. And you know, he's so dashing.
I like this guy.
And meanwhile,
Is it at nighttime? I always imagine him in shadow.
yeah, he's in the shadow.
Yes.
Okay.
And Eleanor is sitting at night, and Marianne keeps getting worse and keeps getting better and keeps getting worse. And she thinks she's going to die. Okay, I realize I missed a key part, so let me just bracket Marianne's illness for a second. Before they left London, Colonel Brandon reveals to Eleanor why he left that day. And he says, I have something to tell you about Willoughby and why he's bad news, and you should be happy that Marianne is not marrying him. He says, Colonel Brandon says, but this story reflects badly on me too. So Brandon's like, when I was young, I grew up the same age. I grew up with this girl, and I loved her. And she was like Marianne, full of life and romantic, and I loved her, and I wanted to marry her. And we were of the same age, and we grew up together, but my parents were never going to have me marry her. She married my older brother, who was a jerk, and he mistreated her, and he was cruel to her, and beat her, and he sucked the joy out of her life, and then he died. And we decided we were going to run away together and go get married in Scotland. And then we were going to, and then something, I can't remember the details, they don't get married, and then she goes off, and she's kind of destitute and alone, and I think she gets like seduced by somebody and has a child out of wedlock, and she dies. And on her deathbed, she's like, Colonel Brandon, take care of my child. And Brandon's like, I will take care of your child forever. So Colonel Brandon has a ward, this little child, and of his dead lover. They were never lovers, but this woman that he loved who reminded him of Marianne, who he loved, and he takes care of this child, and who's like maybe 5 or 6 years younger than the girls, than Eleanor and Marianne. And
It's Willoughby's, isn't it?
No, Willoughby seduced the ward.
The ward? Oh, I thought he was
child.
going to be like the woman that he loved. Okay.
No, Willoughby seduced, because Willoughby's young.
Right.
Willoughby seduced Colonel Brandon's ward. And left her destitute, slept with her. I think it's actually hard to tell. Basically, promised himself to her and left her destitute and, quote, stole her honor. So I think he actually did sleep with her. Yeah. And Willoughby's like, but that's what being a libertine's all about. And Colonel Brandon actually fights a duel with Willoughby and is going to kill him. And wins the duel and has a sword over him. And he's like, you're not worth it, Willoughby.
Whoa.
And Willoughby survives the duel. Okay, that's why they don't like each other.
That's
He
incredible.
is. I like this Brandon more and more.
Yeah.
And the reason why Brandon had to rush off that day is because the ward had been found.
Oh, wow.
She had gone off into some home for deflowered girls or whatever. And so it's Victorian England.
Yeah, sure.
Or it's Edwardian England. And so he finds her and he decides he's going to pay for her and take care of her, whatever. And he's like, Willoughby, I freaking hate you. And so Willoughby, and he's like, this is why you should be happy that Marianne, he's like, this is Willoughby's calling card. Turns out the reason why Willoughby left Marianne that day is his aunt found out about all this and disinherited him.
Whoa.
And so now he's got to go marry some fancy lady for money.
Yeah.
So he goes off and he marries Lady Grey. And he's all handsome and cute. And Lady Grey's like, I want a bad boy. And so she marries Willoughby.
Okay.
And that's why he ditches Marianne. Yeah. Okay, so Eleanor is super happy. So, fast forward, Marianne is dying in this house. And she is super sick. And Eleanor's like, I just want Mom to be here. If Mom can come here, she can help take care of Marianne. I just wish Mom and Brandon to come back. And she hears the door open, and she's like, finally. And she runs downstairs, and who does she see dripping wet and looking concerned? But Willoughby. And Willoughby's like, Eleanor, I'm probably the last person you want to see. She's like, you got that right.
Yeah.
And he's like, but I'm here to explain myself. I hear that Marianne's sick. And she's like, you should not care.
Yeah, that's
you are a married man. You should not be here. And he's like, listen, when I met Marianne, I just loved the fact that she paid attention to me and flirted with me because I like being flirted with. Who doesn't? He's like, I just loved the attention, but I actually grew really, really fond of Marianne, and I would have married her, but you're so unfortunately poor. So I didn't, and I married Lady Grey. But I came here to tell you I feel bad about it. And Eleanor's like, I do not care.
Get out of here.
Yeah, who is this guy?
Leave.
Why are you here?
He's like, I hope this makes a difference to know that I feel bad about it. He's like, listen, my marriage sucks. And she's like, I should
Great.
not hear this.
Yeah, why? Yeah.
And he's like, Lady Grey is not great. She does not love me and I do not love her. And I just think about Marianne all the time. And Eleanor's like, I am not saying any of this garbage to Marianne.
Right.
Like, well, then what's this going to do to Marianne if she, like,
Yeah, exactly.
if he loves her and
he's like, but I just wanted you to know that this is really hard for me.
I hate this guy. He's terrible.
And Eleanor, she's like, but to Eleanor's credit, she does feel sympathy for him because she's like, he's now rich. He got all his money, but he's like in a miserable marriage. He's like, the rest of my life sucks. And she's like, yeah, but you got your money. And he's like, yeah, money's great. But
I do have that.
I do have that.
Yeah.
But I feel bad about this whole thing. And I just want you to know that I feel bad about the way this went down. And Eleanor's like, yeah, if only there was a way to have not had it gone down this way.
Yeah.
Anyway, so he's like, well, I got to go. And he leaves to go be sad. I can't remember if... No, Eleanor does tell Marianne this later. All right, Marianne recovers in the night. And she comes out of the fever and she survives. Mom comes... Brandon comes, and everyone is so pleased that Marianne's alive. And Marianne goes, by having this near-death experience, Marianne has this like change of character. And this is what I want to read. So Marianne has this change of character where she sort of realizes, she finally finds out about the whole thing that Eleanor had been carrying, that Eleanor knew that Lucy was engaged to Edward and couldn't tell anybody. And Marianne is like, oh my goodness, here I am throwing the whole Willoughby thing in your face and everybody is doting over me and you are having the exact same heartbreak. Eleanor, I feel so terrible. And you didn't break this. You didn't cry. You didn't moan. You didn't say, woe is me. You didn't throw a fit. She's like, you are a better version. Like, you had the exact same situation and you bore this better than me. And then Eleanor's like, don't worry about it. Don't mention it. Eleanor has been keeping all of this emotion to herself, and she hasn't been able to let it out. And it's really been affecting her. Anyway, so they have this wonderful conversation. I kind of want to read it because it's Marianne's realizing. It's Marianne's moral formation. It's I don't know if every Jane Austen book has this, but most Jane Austen, all the ones that I've read, the main characters realize that they need to adopt a higher form of virtue before it's too late. And for Willoughby, it was too late. But for Marianne, it's not. And so she realizes this. All right, so... how then, said Eleanor, would you account for his behavior? I would suppose him... Oh, how gladly would I suppose him. Only fickle, very, very fickle. Eleanor said no more. She was debating within herself on the eligibility of beginning her story directly or postponing it till Marianne was in stronger health. Oh, telling the story about that Willoughby showed up.
Yep.
And they crept on for a few minutes in silence. I am not wishing him too much good, said Marianne at last with a sigh. When I wish his secret reflections may be no more unpleasant than my own, he will suffer enough in them. Do you compare his conduct with his? No. I compare it with what it ought to have been. I compare it with yours. Our situations have borne little resemblance. They have borne more than our conduct. Do not, my dearest Eleanor, let your kindness defend when I know your judgment must censor. My illness has made me think. It had given me leisure and calmness for serious recollection. Long before I was enough recovered to talk, I was perfectly able to reflect. I considered the past. I saw in my own behavior since the beginning of our acquaintance with him last autumn nothing but a series of imprudence towards myself and want of kindness to others. She was doing that like, no one has ever been in love, and I'm the only one that knows what it's like to be in love. You normies don't know love, right? She was that kind of person.
Yes.
I saw that my own feelings had prepared my sufferings, and that my want of fortitude under them had almost led me to the grave. My illness, I well knew, had been entirely brought on by myself by such negligence of my own health as I had felt even at the time to be wrong. Had I died, it would have been self-destruction. I did not know my danger till the danger was removed. But with such feelings as these reflections gave me, I wonder at my recovery, wondered that the very eagerness of my desire to live, to have time for atonement to my God, and to you all did not kill me at once. She goes on to say, I, and only I knew your heart and its sorrows, yet what did it influence me? Not to any compassion that could benefit you or myself. Your example was before me, but to what avail? And so she basically says, like, you have been the better version. You have been and carried yourself in the way that I ought to have carried myself. You have been heartbroken, but you had the double heartache of not being able to tell the ones you loved to share the burdens. And here I was having everybody play nursemaid to poor, heartbroken, jilted Marianne. And I didn't bear it. I actually made myself so sick with my own emotions that I could have died. And you have been bearing it and also keeping the family going and keeping me going. You had to be put in that position where you like told Edward about his job so he could now marry this like troll of a girl. Like you are a model of endurance and fortitude. And Eleanor, and she's like, I want to be like you, Eleanor. And Eleanor's like, that is very kind. I love you. Like, yes, but let's go home. Let's go to Mother, and I will bear the sadness. So they go home. Then a little man comes in one day. He's like, I was at the market the other day, and you know who I saw? I saw Mrs. Ferrars. And they're like, oh, you mean the mother? She's like, no, Lucy, that Lucy girl. She's now Lucy Ferrars. And Eleanor, this was finally the moment. Eleanor had been holding out hope that maybe Edward was going to marry her and this was going to happen. But now the die is cast. Lucy is Lucy Ferrars. And at this moment, the dam breaks for Eleanor. Or no, actually, no, I should keep that back. The dam doesn't break. She says, okay, I can move on. It's happened. The thing I feared is here. Now that it's here, it's not so bad. I can put all of those feelings to bed. Marianne, you lost your Willoughby. I have lost my Edward. We move on in fortitude. And everyone's like, Eleanor, I'm so sorry. She's like, he never promised himself to me. I'm okay. It's okay. And everyone's like, all right. Meanwhile, they've been spending, Colonel Brandon, who's brought mom, has been making, she's like, how's Marianne doing?
Can I ask, did Edward have
Yes.
a brother?
Edward, the younger brother who inherited the fortune.
Yeah.
Yeah, anyway.
Oh,
Anyway, let's keep going.
okay.
Meanwhile, Colonel Brandon's in town. He keeps coming around. He's like, how's Marianne doing? And he invites them over to his fancy estate. And Marianne hears the whole story about Brandon.
Yeah.
And she's like, wait, Colonel Brandon had like a secret romantic love affair as a young man? How interesting. and she's like, he fought a duel with Willoughby? That's hot. and he's kind of like, he like rides his horse really like proudly, and he loves good music, and he has like, he's got like an estate that's got really nice fruit trees. Marianne loves fruit trees.
She loves her fruit trees. I remember that.
And Brandon is kind of, everyone's sort of like, so you're going to marry Brandon? And Marianne's like, I'm not saying no.
Oh.
Anyway, so this whole thing is percolating in the background. And then it looks like it's going to happen. Now, maybe in the in-between, we can talk about like how we should think about like a 36-year-old marrying like now a 20-year-old and how weird that is, or if that's weird. But we can talk about that later. But meanwhile, they're back at the estate, and Marianne's kind of being like, Marianne had said, I'm never going to love again. You only get one great love in your life, and mine was Willoughby, so I'm just going to be like a spinstress. But now Marianne's like, the sun is shining. You know, she is a happy girl again because she's kind of flirting with the idea of Brandon. And they see someone coming down the road, and it's Edward. And Edward is coming to the house, and they're like, is he with his wife? Is he with Lucy? And he's just by himself. And he comes in the house, and he's all awkward there, and he's like standing in the foyer. He's like, hey, guys. And Eleanor is there, and she's like, how is Mrs. Ferrars? And he's like, oh, Mrs. Ferrars, she's fine. She's great. And they're like, oh, are you settling in well? He's like, settling in with my mom. No, my mom kicked me out. She's like, no. I don't mean, Marianne is talking. She's like, I don't mean how is your mother. I mean, how is Lucy Ferrars? And he says, oh, she is well. She married my brother. And at this moment, Eleanor's emotional dam breaks, and she is so overcome with the emotion that she's been walling up inside for so long. She leaves the room and runs into the kitchen and just weeps and weeps and weeps with joy. I'm even getting emotional thinking about it. With joy and with sadness over the whole situation. Yeah. The situation has finally, it's like the very thing that she hoped for that she thought was gone forever has finally come. Turns out that as soon as Lucy found out there was no fortune, she's like, your brother's cute. And she goes she goes to the brother and she's like, Edward, I'm not marrying you. Edward, I'm not marrying you. And she flirts with the brother, and the brother is like dopey enough and rich enough that as soon as somebody compliments him, he's like, I think I love you. And so they get married. And so now she's rich.
Wait, no, the mom was cool with it though? Because the
mom's cool with it. The mom is, she's not super cool with it, but the thing is, Lucy is so complimentary and flattery. She's such a flatterer. The mom's like, maybe she's cool. She seems to recognize my worth.
Oh, so it took a little while.
Yeah, it took a little while, but Lucy's flattery works. Yep. And Edward has come, and he's like, I'm here to propose to you. And Eleanor, I have loved you forever. And he's like, I've been an idiot. When I had been engaged to Lucy, and we sent all these letters, and she was always like lukewarm to me, but I had given my word. But now that it's off, this was the first place I came to. And as soon as that dissolved, I got on my horse and I came to you. And he's like, can you ever love me? And Eleanor's like, yes. And they get married. And they move into the little house. And they have their simple country life. And Brandon and Marianne get married. Okay. And Marianne gets her,
now she's loaded.
Yeah. Marianne gets her, like, broody, romantic, with cool guy with this interesting past who's a colonel who's got, like, cool stories from India. And Colonel Brandon gets his, like, beautiful flower that he gets to cultivate, and he gets to, like, feed her peaches and play piano and, like, make her all fat and happy in the country because he just broods over her and, like, dotes over her forever. And both women get the loves of their life. So man, that was like the long synopsis of the story. How much time do we got left?
We are overtime.
You're so overtime.
We are like definitely past where we should be.
So we're going to end it there.
At least 10 minutes over.
We got to quick, or else I can't upload it.
So fine. So very, very quickly, and let me just say, like, the two major sort of things that if people are going to be reading this or studying this or thinking about this, the relationship between the life of emotion and feeling and the life of duty, honor, and in many cases suppressing your emotion, those are characterized in Eleanor and Marianne. And of course, Eleanor is keyed up as being the better of the two. It is better to do your duty and to hold your emotions close. But there is a perniciousness to that as well. That could have undone Eleanor if she didn't have the amount of fortitude that she did. So there's that theme going on. And the other theme is that every single man in the story has had some sort of moral failing as a younger person, and the consequences that has on the women in his life, and in many cases the more vulnerable people in his life. The ward not getting the money from John at the beginning of the book, Willoughby being a jerk, Edward just not manning up and like saying what he wants. And there's something to be said about that. But I guess we're super over, so maybe we can talk about more of this in the in-between. Or these are the
second episode?
Maybe a second episode, but these are the thing is I wanted to do primers of the book so that everybody has all of the plots of the book, so when I do a bigger Jane Austen analysis that they can kind of use to go back to these books and they've got the stories. So maybe that analysis comes with the bigger analysis that I'm wanting to do later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
So anyway, so think of this as like, this is the
just the plot part.
Spark notes.
Yeah, this is the preamble to a bigger series that I want to do later. So you now know Sense and Sensibility of the story.
What a delight. That was wonderful.
Yeah. Now I don't want to read the book.
You should.
Wait, hold on. Go read the book.
Because it won't have Donaldson's, voices.
Do an audiobook.
People lurking in the shadows.
It's got to be public domain, right? This has been Classical Stuff You Should Know. You can find us online at Patreon, patreon.com/classical stuff. You can find us on X at Cliscal Stuff, CLSSCAL Stuff. You can email us at theguys@classicalstuff.net. We're also online at classicalstuff.net. Thank you all so much for listening, and we will talk to you again soon. Bye.
Bye.
Ciao.